down, goodbye to the crown. Farewell the jewel crown, farewell the velvet gown. Watch it all come tumbling down, goodbye to the crown. Goodbye to the crown.
Hello, bonjour, hola, and welcome to the Monarchy. Believe it or not, this is our 70th episode right here on Press TV, and I'm Samson Sees, your host. Well, what a saga it has been so far, and we thank you all for sending in your emails and messages. After all, we are discussing the not-so-okay UK. Therefore, we need networking and interaction. So what's happening from the alternative side of Britain in this episode? Check it out. Things are still looking too wet for the UK. But aside from that, here are some more important stories. The headlines. Let's hear them. British Prime Minister David Cameron's Conservative Party has lost its position to the country's anti-EU party that managed to grab a seat in a parliamentary by-election. The anti-European Union UK Independence Party, or UKIP, has pushed Cameron's ruling Conservative Party into the third place in a single parliamentary seat vote won by the opposition Labour Party. Labour won the Wythenshawe and Sale East seat on the outskirts of Manchester with 13,261 votes, while second-placed UKIP received 4,301 votes, and the Conservatives managed to grab just 3,479 votes. British Prime Minister David Cameron has gone back on his pledge to let voters recall disgraced parliamentarians, sparking a furious coalition row. As part of the coalition agreement of 2010, the Prime Minister had vowed to bring an early legislation to allow voters to force a by-election in an attempt to deal with vote anger over the expenses scandal. Last year, Cameron watered down the proposal to prevent attempts to remove sitting MPs. The coalition junior partners, the Liberal Democrats, accused the Prime Minister of blocking the bill from inclusion in the final Queen's speech of the Parliament, expected in May. Prince Charles, the heir apparent to the British throne, made a 4-day official visit to Saudi Arabia and Qatar this month. He met King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz Al Saud and Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani during his trips. In March 2013, Prince Charles and his wife Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, also visited Saudi Arabia as part of a 9-day tour of the Middle East, with stops in Jordan, Qatar and Oman. This comes as Britain, as well as Saudi Arabia and Qatar, are considered as major foreign supporters of the ongoing militancy in Syria. Joanna Dennehy's case is turned to one of the most shocking in recent British criminal history. Not only because of the brutal nature of the criminal acts, but also because of the apparent lack of motive for them. After killing her third victim, Joanna Dennehy phoned her friend and sang the Britney Spears track, "Oops, I Did It Again," down the line. Only she knows for sure why she embarked on her killing spree, but police believe the best explanation is because she was simply having fun. Twisted serial killer Joanna Dennehy chuckled in court and claimed she was not sorry for stabbing 3 men to death. And as Dennehy was let out of Cambridge Crown Court at the end of the hearing, she said, "I want everyone to know I am sorry about the attempted murders, but I am not sorry for the murders." An urgent inquiry has been launched in Britain into allegations that British doctors have secretly given deadly overdoses to terminally ill children in unlawful mercy killings. Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt ordered the probe and pledged to investigate whether the law was broken after retired GP Michael Irwin claimed during a debate on LBC Radio that UK medics illegally helped 2 sick children to die. Euthanasia is the assisted suicide of terminally ill people. Michael Irwin's allegation came just hours after, for the first time in the world's history, Belgian lawmakers overwhelmingly endorsed a bill which allows euthanasia in the case of children. Footage posted online suggests that British citizens fighting in Syria have been involved in acts of execution and torture. The footage obtained by Sky News shows British members of the Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Nusra Front torturing and beating their fellow militants. The video, which first appeared on social media websites, is believed to have been shot in a militant-held area in northwestern Syria. The material is also found to be uploaded onto the accounts of 2 men from London who are currently fighting as militants in Syria. The flooding in the Thames region is not due to the river bursting its banks. Oh no. The issues are far more complex than that. While the UK government admits failings over flood response, some point fingers at the wrong long-term policies by the recent consecutive governments. Paul Mitchell of International Committee of the Fourth provides his analysis about the roots of the current natural catastrophes.
There is absolutely no sign of this threat abating. And with further rain and strong winds forecast throughout the week, things may well get worse before they get better.
Torrential rain has led to the deaths of several people in recent weeks and flooded thousands of homes in the UK, many of which have suffered the same misfortune at regular intervals over the last few years. Large areas of prime agricultural land have been submerged under the highest ever recorded water levels. The Environment Agency has issued 16 severe flood warnings, meaning danger to life, 2 in the Somerset levels and 14 for towns and villages in the Thames Valley to the west of London. More than 350 other flood warnings and alerts are also in place, mainly in southern England and the Midlands. Rail links to the southwest of the country have been cut by landslides. The government has sought to shift blame for the weeks of misery and chaos caused by the floods onto the Environment Agency. Accusations by Floods Minister Eric Pickles that the agency was driven by political correctness, gave bad advice to the government, and attempted to divide town and country over funding matters have been met with almost universal scorn.
I think it's been a very unhappy time for Lord Smith, and no doubt his lordship's reflecting on the feedback that he's got from the people of Somerset. But at least the Environment Agency won't have to organise a focus group to understand what people think.
The Chartered Institution of Water and Environmental Management called his outburst absolute tosh, and that the real problem was huge cuts to the EA's funding. The flooding has revealed the decay in the physical and social infrastructure of Britain, overseen by the Conservative-led coalition government and its Labour Party predecessor. Decades of underinvestment in critical social infrastructure, including flood prevention projects, have resulted in a social catastrophe. The Somerset levels and moors were once held up as the prime example of flood control. The levels are a man-made low-lying environment reclaimed from the sea centuries ago. Flooding has occurred most winters, but it has been controlled by a complex and interrelated system of pumping, maintenance, dredging, and the use of water meadows or washlands to absorb storm surges. Following the floods in the winter of 1999 to 2000, the water meadows were overwhelmed and new areas of houses, businesses, agricultural land, roads, and nature reserves were flooded for several weeks. Scientific reports called for the creation of temporary flood storage areas on higher areas, the restitution of dredging and maintenance of river channels in the tidal areas that had been abandoned, the upgrading of pumping stations, an increase in the use of water meadows, the building of a tidal sluice or barrier in the Bristol Channel, and restricting new development on the floodplain. The National Audit Office warned that a large proportion of flood defences were inadequate and inconsistent, and that up to 2 million homes and buildings were in areas at risk of flooding. Describing changing weather patterns due to climate change and the likelihood of more rainfall, it warned that the situation would get worse. Most of these recommendations were ignored by the Labour government, which set about slashing the EA's budget and workforce. By 2008, the EA had decided that providing a robust economic case for maintenance works on the Somerset levels and moors remains a challenge, and that it was doubtful that all the pumping stations were necessary. Following the floods in 2010 and 2012, Somerset Drainage Board's consortium chief executive Nick Stevens told a local meeting that the EA has agreed that desilting or dredging would substantially alleviate flooding and reduce disruption and financial consequences to the country, but doesn't have the money to meet the estimated £2 million cost. The Parliamentary Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee has also investigated the 2012 floods and identified specific pinch points, including the Perrette River on the levels. Across the UK, the committee stated that investment remains insufficient to meet growing flood risk, and that just a worthless extra £20 million every year for the next 25 years was needed to keep pace with threats due to climate and demographic changes. The committee revealed that the so-called partnership model used to justify budget cuts and a shift away from public provisions of vital services had led to the withdrawal of the EA from maintenance activity and placed additional cost burdens on councils, which were also suffering cuts. The hope that private sector money would make up the shortfall had secured very little to date.
I don't think, certainly the people I've met here overnight and this morning, I think what they're more interested in is not who's blaming whom, but how people are working together to make sure that their businesses are back to full strength, that their homes are kept safe and their farms are back to full operation.
Basically what we want to happen is want the man to stand up and say, I'm very sorry, we've got this wrong, we should have done this 12 months ago, we haven't, we'll do everything we can now to put things right, that's what we want to hear, but we're not hearing it.
Built a home that we love living in a village that we love living in, because the people in this village are second to none. And look at it. I mean, you know, I feel seriously angry about this.
Men on the ground are doing a fantastic job, but the men at the top don't know what they're doing.
But it shouldn't have got to this stage, if you understand what I mean. I can't move my car, I can't go to work. This is just an ongoing thing with the council.
People here who are suffering, and they will suffer, you know, not just emotional distress, but severe financial loss, because insurance companies never pay out 100%. My suggestion a couple of days ago was we could use a small fraction of the foreign aid budget to look after our own people.
To see it now, it just breaks your heart. I feel numb, because this is the second time I've seen this. Last year they told us it was a 1 in 100 event, and we're here again. And it just isn't fair to do this to people. If that's what they want to do, is to turn the land back to what it used to be, buy our houses off us, all of us, buy our houses off us, all of us would move, because we do not want to live like this.
The animals went in 2 by 2, hurrah, hurrah. The animals went in 2 by 2, hurrah, hurrah. The animals went in 2 by 2, the elephant and the kangaroo, and they all went into the ark for to get out of the rain. The animals went in 3 by 3, hurrah, hurrah. The animals went in 3 by 3, hurrah, hurrah. The animals went in 3 by 3, the wasp, the ant and the bumblebee, and they all went into the ark for to get out of the rain. The animals went in 4 by 4, hurrah, hurrah.
It is estimated that the cost of clearing up after this winter's floods and storms could hit £1 billion. One-third of the British public believe the weekly parliamentary grilling of the UK Premier, known as Prime Minister's Questions, or PMQs, is putting voters off politics. But what is the Prime Minister Question Session, and how important is it to the parliamentary democracy in the UK?
The Prime Minister has to answer questions every week in Parliament for 30 minutes. every Wednesday starting at 12 o'clock. So 12 till 12:30 is Prime Minister's question time. And it's a very theatrical occasion. And whilst any member can ask a question, there are two systems that ensure more or less it's known who is going to be questioning the Prime Minister. The Leader of the Opposition is allowed to ask up to 8 supplementary questions to the Prime Minister during the 30-minute slot. And any other member who is called because they've put their name in and been selected as somebody to ask a question can ask 1 supplementary question to the Prime Minister. And the Leader of the Opposition normally uses it as a way of raising particular subjects. And so, for example, 2 weeks ago he might have wanted to raise the issue of the government's response to the very serious flooding that's taken place in the west of England. Or on other occasions he might use it to raise concerns about the health service or all kinds of issues. There is a much more serious questioning of the Prime Minister that happens every 3 months, and that is when the liaison committee, that's the chairs of all the parliamentary select committees. There are select committees covering each department: Home Affairs, Foreign Affairs, Justice, Environment, Local Government, all those kind of issues are all covered. And this group interviews the Prime Minister at some length, normally for 1 hour or so, and it's all televised, and that is quite detailed.
In a research conducted by the Hansard Society think tank, some 33% of Britons said they were turned off politics by watching PMQs. The Ipsos Mori poll of more than 1,200 people also found that 67% of the public think there is too much party political point scoring instead of answering the question during primetime debates in the House of Commons. Moreover, 47% of those polled agreed that the weekly sessions are too noisy and aggressive.
But it's all done with a lot of shouting and a lot of interruptions and a great deal of noise. And the Speaker of the House, Mr. John Bercow, frequently stops the thing and calls for quiet so that the Prime Minister or Leader of the Opposition can be heard. And it is more theatrical than information that we get.
Meanwhile, the study suggested that Commons Speaker John Bercow should be given the power to sin bin misbehaving MPs for the remainder of the questions or for a number of hours.
As many as other opinions say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Division, clear the lobby.
Well, if the answer is not satisfactory to the question that you've asked, then you don't have any comeback as an ordinary MP. So if I ask the Prime Minister if he's going to spend a great deal more money on my local hospital, for example, and he just says that I should be aware the government is putting much more money into the health service, or not, as the case may be, that is not a satisfactory answer to my question, but I have no comeback other than to do a written question to him or try and raise it as an individual debate in Parliament. And so the Prime Minister often replies to Ed Miliband, who's the Leader of the Opposition, by trying to ask him a question.
It is called a theatrical procedure in Parliament. There is no leverage for MPs if they are not satisfied by the Prime Minister answers. So in this case, what is the point of PMQs?
Well, good question. Prime Minister's question time has developed into this kind of big gladiatorial contest between the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. But in historical terms, that's fairly recent. An older MP once told me that in the 1950s, he's not an MP anymore, in the 1950s the Prime Minister would take questions and would quite often say to a member that subject has nothing to do with me, I don't know anything about it, you better ask the Minister of Transport. So if a member would get up and say, what are you doing about improving the railway line and the service in my constituency, now the Prime Minister would give some general answer without ever really knowing very much about the about the subject, and in reality the question should have been better put to the Minister of Transport.
Putting aside all the formalities, we have asked ordinary citizens if they could have a private meeting with David Cameron. What would they say to him?
To maybe try and attempt to cut the uni fees back down as much as possible, because obviously now 9,000 a year is getting a bit, you know, it's for a select group of people now really, so that's about it really.
We'll increase the salary of academics. That's what I would say.
Oh. Oh. What would I say?
Do more for what the people of Britain want rather than what his party wants, because there are lots of sort of backbenchers in his party which you know, he's trying to please them rather than please the people that elected him, and like, you know, he can't even get the support of his party.
I'd give him a slap. I'm joking. I'd just say that to listen to the people, I guess, and not be involved in wars abroad, and to focus on the economy in this country and domestic issues like they're closing hospitals here. You know, we have an increasing debt as well, so, you know, we can't afford to spend all of this money abroad and stuff.
With David Cameron? I would say lots of things. I would be quite angry, I think.
Why is your face so red?
I'd ask him what his solid plans are for the future to improve the economy and get people working again.
Oh, God. I couldn't tell you, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm most concerned about our attitude on Syria at the moment, and that we're not taking any refugees, even on a temporary basis. So that's my particular area of concern.
Can't see a point. I've got nothing to say, really.
Well, I think the current approach to fixing the economy, so to speak, is, in my view, disastrous. I think the cuts they're making relentlessly are more ideological than they are practical. I think a lot of people are suffering and will suffer as a result of these cuts. I think education is suffering, the National Health Service is suffering, higher education is suffering, certainly the arts and social services are suffering.
Now, I do realise why nearly a third of the public say they're put off politics by Prime Minister's question time. I can well understand that. But I ask people to look at it the other way around. It is good that the head of the government, the Prime Minister, is called to account. You can put questions to him. And in the build-up to the Iraq War in 2003, for example, many of us used Prime Minister's question time a great deal to raise issues with the then Prime Minister Tony Blair about the alleged existence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, what agreements he had made with George Bush, all those kind of things. And Blair would have to give some kind of answer. I think that, personally, Prime Minister's question time should last for longer. Maybe there should be more specific subjects within it for individual members to ask questions, and a second supplementary question for each MP. So the Prime Minister couldn't just get away with an answer such as the general one that I've suggested about health. He would actually be forced to answer the question.
Well, perhaps the government isn't as popular as it thought it was. But what's your take on it? We want to know. So do go ahead and send your emails to britain@presstv.ir. Or if you prefer more of an online showdown, you can write on our Facebook wall. That's UK Desk Press TV. Don't you forget it. Also, do not forget to carry on watching the Monarchy, because the Monarchy will carry on watching Britain. Smashing. See you next week, God willing. Goodbye from me and the team here in the studio.
Poacher come with his poacher's gun, out in the woods to shoot someone. My lord, your time has come, right between the eyes. Felled his master not by chance, away with pomp and circumstance. Come join our merry dance to the rhythm of goodbye. Farewell the jewel crown, farewell the velvet gown, watch you all nothing really. Wave of a hand and a life of Riley. Pot Nazi, Pod King Billy, goodbye to the crown.